Fausty one. Prince
Oh, yeah.
Faustus Blackwood, the Fausty one. Faustykins.
You done?
I was wondering if today we could change your title from the Faustiest one to the Hoodoo Queen, innit? You fancy being a queen for the evening? I know you've been a queen in past evenings. Don't need to dress up this time. Although if you've got a tiara or something knocking about, maybe you could... You're looking for one because you probably haven't got one to hand, haven't you?
I don't have a tiara to hand, but I do own a tiara.
You do own a tiara. I don't know if the Hoodoo Queens actually have the tiaras, do they?
No, I don't think so.
No, probably not.
I think Queen is more of a status there, not a dress-up situation.
Yes. So, we have a little bit of news that I was made aware of by our good friend Mr. Railroad, okay? And do you know what that news is, Chris? You may have heard it. I don't know if there's been any headlines, but it's been certainly the information was made available on Facebook and social media and such. We are mourning a loss, aren't we? Yeah.
I feel like I should be wearing black.
Well, I'm wearing red. I mean, it's closer to black than blue. But there we go. I mean, black-hearted as well. So, you know our friend, who's not really our friend.
Shall make a make-do sash.
Make a make-do sash. There we go. We're mourning the death of not a friend, but what would we call her? Would you call her a peer?
A frenemy.
A frenemy. She's not really a frenemy, though, is she? I mean, frenemy implies that they make you somehow better because of the friction and such. I mean, she wasn't even able to stand up to the most simplest of spells. Yes. It turns out our dearly departed Lady Snake from Lady Snake do fame, and of course that Ghost Adventures fame. It turns out that the god and goddess could not protect Lady Snake after all, and that she has in fact passed on.
In the name of the god and goddess, please protect Lady Snake.
Anyone would think that would work. Any Wiccan would think that would work. As it turns out, it was petition-based magic, and that god and goddess clearly want a listening. Yeah. Is that right, Chris?
Sounds that way. Does sound that way.
Now you've got a black sash thing on. Does that mean we can now say that you're like black belt level Fausty? Black belt level witch?
Maybe.
Do you think that we should...
I want to ask a ridiculous question, really, which is, how did she go? It wasn't a Mars bar, was it?
I believe it was something to do with underlying health issues that she's been battling for a while now.
Okay, so it was Mars bars.
Mainly since the beginning of this here season.
Oh.
I should guess. I don't know. But they do say where attention goes, energy flows, and there is a lot of not particularly nice attention/energy being gone in that direction. I don't think.
So have we been upgraded to a Cancer?
I don't know. I don't know if we are in fact cancerous. I've been called worse.
Whoops.
Oh well. But yes, our friend Lady Snake, oh no, not Lady Snake, our friend Lady Snake is in fact passed away, which is a shame. God and goddess rest her soul. She's with the maggots now, Chris. She's with the maggots now. At least I presume so if there's a natural burial. I don't really know.
Oh. Does that mean we can wait 6 months and dig her up?
Well,
can we put her in a?
I mean, we could
put
do
her in an ammo
another
box too.
Another human skull. She isn't that far away, is she?
No, not really.
Not really.
She could do some real magic then.
I guess she could be part of a real magic ritual, whether she wants to or not.
Yes.
Right. So we are not, even though we are not taking the piss out of the individual in question. He's quite sad when people die, if you like them. She was a source of, what would you say? It's not something to look up to, not a source of. She was a source of constant entertainment for us and all of the Faustylings that are watching the Fausty Witches
She was a
show.
benchmark for not a paramount for not how to behave.
Yes. So I wondered we should probably we got that video, the one where we did the Lady Snake one from the original series was taken down from YouTube because YouTube didn't like all of the copyrighted stuff. So we are going to reshoot that special episode, Lady Snake episode. We're going to reshoot it as a tribute to the late Lady Snake, and it will be released sometime on the Fausty calendar in December this year as a tribute to Lady Snake. God knows what that fucking episode's going to be like, but it cannot be worse than the first one, can it?
No.
No, well, we haven't done it yet. We don't know. So you'll have to get your old tarot decks and runes out and tell us whether it's going to be worse than the first one. But anyway, enough of that morbidity. Let's talk about today's subject. What's today's subject, Mr. Chris?
The hoodoo that we do that you do.
The hoodoo we do. Do you do hoodoo?
I don't do any hoodoo.
Do you do voodoo?
Definitely you do.
Do you do voodoo?
No.
No. Okay. Well, this is going to be a shit episode then, isn't it?
It's not going to be a shit episode because we talk about voodoo practice all the time and hoodoo on the basis that we don't practice it because we're not part of those closed traditions. But what we do often talk about is the amount of people that do kind of hoodoo and voodoo inspired work. So, it's not like it's not a subject we know well. It's just that we're not part of those traditions. I think it's important to point those out, that we are not part of those traditions.
That's got to count for something, hasn't it, Chris? We work against those practitioners and people, so we must know a lot in order to undo their magic, which is often very easy. Store-bought, one would say. So,
my biggest problem is more the fact that the people, when they purchase it, because they're not really involved in the process, I feel like that even though it could be better than store-bought, I don't think they're as invested in it. I think when someone pays a high price for something, they expect it to do all of the work. So there's no investment, is there?
Yes. Well, they expect it to work. I mean, I have likened some of these shops, these witchcrafty shops and hoodoo shops and such like that, to Rojana's. Have you been to Rojana's, Chris? You've been to Rojana's, haven't you? Yeah. It's a wonderful place. Everything's very, very cheap, and you can get some great deals from there. But the most fun part about Ranjana's is that you pay a pittance for something, and you wonder on the drive home whether the thing you bought actually works or whether it's just a pile of shit. And I see a lot of that with witchcraft shops and a lot of these, pay and light type things like magical grenades and such. You buy the money magic candle, you light it, and then all of a sudden you're poorer, worse off than you were at the end of the month, than you were at the beginning of the month. And the candle, it came with instructions and said to light it. What did I do wrong? Much like Rajani electronics, a lot of it really doesn't work. You pay that £1.50 for a portable CD player, thinking this is far too cheap, it's not going to work, and it does. And you pay £1.50 for another electronic device, and it doesn't work. It's fascinating. It's part of the fun, isn't it? I think.
You're on a Ranjani's desk right now.
This isn't Ranjani's. This is IKEA, actually.
No, mine.
Oh, yours? Yeah, yours came from Regina's because we did that because of that thing you did, wasn't it?
Exhibition.
The squat shop. or what was it, weaving shop, wasn't it? Yeah, from your weaving studio that I helped make. I helped make that.
Hmm.
I picked up the table and carried it in, and Chris dressed it. It was all proper nice, even if people didn't get the fucking concept.
No, morons.
Oh, they are, aren't they? Right, so Hoodoo versus Voodoo and such. Let's just go over this really, really quickly, because then we can get on to like the Faustiness, you know, the bitching part and the educational side of things, which we'll throw in there if we have to. So Voodoo versus Hoodoo and such like that. Very often, many people would say Voodoo is a magical religion, or a religion with a lot of magic inherently within it, whereas Hoodoo is quite a mix match of magical practice. I think that Hoodoo is a wonderful thing to study for those that are interested in professional witchcraft and the cunning arts, like of the, you know, Britain and Europe and such like that, because it's a wonderful way to actually look at that, because it's still alive and well, whereas a lot of the cunning arts is kind of very small or dying out. It's definitely picked up with this whole capitalism thing, hasn't it? But looking at it and looking how things are different depending on the practitioners, how things are very much kind of like almost like the old apothecaries turned into pharmacies, where you just basically go and buy the cream and rub it on. No need for a doctor type thing these days, whether it's an MD or whether it's a witch doctor. It's kind of one of these things that is very much shop product, is producty, isn't it? And there are a lot of things like that through cunning folk arts and folk magic and stuff like that. But all of this kind of hoodoo stuff is still very much alive and well, and it's not been going for that long, you know, with regards to being referred to as hoodoo, really basically since, you know, certain people were stolen from Africa and such. Like, what's his name? The Buffalo Soldier man, Bob Marley sings about, yeah? I would put a Bob Marley clip in, but I wasn't smart enough to have downloaded one. I really should have for this episode. This would have been brilliant Buffalo Soldier track, wouldn't it? Oh well. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. So there's a couple of things that we would put out there very simply. The first thing is that hoodoo practice varies considerably depending on practitioners and who they learnt their craft from and such like that, and it varies in terms of popularity with specific iconic forms, methods and such over time. One of the really interesting things is to compare and contrast, or to try and compare and contrast that currently from speaking to different magical practitioners, because some people that would claim to practice hoodoo and other people that would claim to practice something else that looks kind of like that, but they don't call it hoodoo. And some people that would say, I'm from this tradition or that tradition, or I learnt this from grandma or some old woman down the road. A lot of these people have very big disagreements. There's quite a lot like that in witchcraft and such. But it still gets lumbered under this big umbrella. And there's a lot of hoodoo practitioners I've noticed that like to shit on each other, much like witches like to shit on each other from a great height, in terms of saying who's right, who's wrong, and so on and so forth. Now, there was a hoodoo inspired course that we were putting together, which was all about hoodoo inspired witchery and all that kind of thing for the Thoth mystery school, which will probably be coming out next year. But I did share actually the beginning little parts of the notes that accompanies the course in PDF format in the Witchcraft Live Facebook group and the No Holds Barred Witchcraft Facebook group. And what I did was I thought, rather than taking modern approaches, let's see where a lot of these people are getting things from. Who are the big famous hoodoo practitioners and such? And let's see what they have to say and where they get their sources from and where they learn stuff from and that kind of thing. And there was one piece of original source, let's say, that kept coming up a lot. The original source was a compendium of books, so a group of books by someone called Harry Hyatt, which was Hoodoo Conjuration Witchcraft root work, which is, I think, is a 3 or 4 volume set, where this guy Harry Hyatt, who was an Anglican an Anglican vicar or something like that, basically went around interviewing practitioners, so hoodoo practitioners, magical practitioners around America, and also the clients of practitioners. What's really interesting is that there's quite a lot of these courses and such that you can go on. There's one I quoted, or there's a couple I quoted in the work. So some famous practitioners' books and courses. There is the Lucky Mojo one by Catherine Ironwood, which we'll talk about in a bit. Udemy, Hoodoo and Conjure for Beginners, which is $14.99, last checked. The Hoodoo Diploma course from the Centre of Excellence, which is £127, often reduced to like 30 quid or something like that. And there's other books that claim to teach, which are basically kind of just like catalogues. So they kind of say, Chris, oh, you want to do this money spell, get the money drawing oil, get the money candle. And it's kind of like, wait a minute, you're telling me to buy that product from you, buy that product from you, and buy that product to you and mix them together. That ain't really, from my perspective, doing a magic. That's a catalogue, isn't it? You're literally like, how do I sell all of the money products at once? Because if they want money, they'll probably haven't got a lot of money. They ain't going to want to spend a lot of money. Therefore, they probably just buy the cheapest thing, which is probably either going to be a candle or some incense or something like that. But how can I bundle this together? Capitalist shill that I am. I know I'll create a ritual and I'll take this thing, which apparently should work, because money drawing oil draws money in, so therefore surely you can just buy that and use that. You don't need to buy the candle and everything, but I don't know. Like I said, I'm not an expert on hoodoo. Now, again, it's a lot like, I think, cunning folk arts, professional witchery, that kind of thing, in that there are some magical practitioners that inherit serious traditions that are complete and utter bullshit, that do fuck all and are completely ineffective, right? There are other people that inherit magical knowledge and build upon magical knowledge that is extremely effective, okay? And then there are some people that just mix and match different things and kind of like the aesthetic and such of it, and they want to dress up and call themselves the Hoodoo Queen or something like that. They don't really do anything. I believe they call it LARPing, is that right? LARPing? Yeah.
Live action role play.
Live action role play. IRL in real life. Yeah. So, what is your personal opinion of hoodoo as a system of magic? Do you see it as a system of magic? What do you actually see it as? If someone was to say, Mr. Chris, what the fuck is this hoodoo? What is hoodoo? What would you say? Condensing that into something that can fit into this episode, of course, not a 2-hour-long lecture.
Well, I could easily give the 2-hour-long lecture, but I won't. So I would say, I suppose, that it is a blend of kind of folk magic alongside a combination of land-based magics. So kind of what they would, in the good old Wiccan books, called low magic. So elemental-based magic. So just book one of the of Agrippa is that kind of natural magic aspect. So I would, probably describe it as that, heavily Christianized in the kind of same way that the cunning ways were. The biggest difference being there is a big gap from when it was practiced to now when it's practiced current, whereas hoodoo's not quite an unbroken line, but in some places will be. Like it has the potential to be an unbroken line, whereas the cunning folk, you know for a fact there will be no unbroken lines that go all the way back to cunning folk. Too many changes occurred, prohibition, etc. Whereas with the hoodoo culture, there is a possibility that there are still a few. I wouldn't claim all of them are, but the majority of them have the potential to be unbroken in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just the literature supporting it. It may not be proper hand down one to another, but you would at the very least be inheriting texts that were kind of within your own lifetime or the oldest people within your lifetime, if that makes sense.
One of the interesting things I think about is that cunning folk arts, practical witchcraft and such is survivalist magic. This thing we always talk about is highly practical, and if it doesn't work or people don't get results, or basically it has a main purpose of helping you actually live your life, getting by. Like without it, you'd be fucking dead, basically. It's necessary for your survival. With the evolution and traditions of hoodoo, you see that a lot with cunning folk practice and some forms of traditional witchcraft, cunning folk arts and such, in that it is highly practical and it's necessary. It is that someone stole my fucking sheep. Who the fuck is it? I'm going to use some magic to find out and curse that fucker when I find out who it is, type thing, right? Or I'm ill, I'm dying, help, I'm dying, blah, blah, blah. Doctor can't do anything, or I can't afford the doctor. Local person's giving me some herbs, I feel better, type thing is important. And it truly is important for the survival of people. Difference I see a lot with cunning folk arts and a lot of hoodoo and stuff like that is that with the cunning folk arts, you tend to find famous practitioners that may or may not pass some bits of knowledge on to others, but when they die out, they go. So there are one or two famous examples where they have, they've passed their knowledge on to someone else, or they've learned some of their knowledge from other people. And there is almost like a line of 2 or 3 of them. With hoodoo, it's a little bit different, because with hoodoo, when you're looking at it, you're looking at what would have been considered the dregs of humanity, the dregs of the Americas. So what you have is which a lot of people would say hoodoo was evolved from slavery, slave magic and such like that. When you really delve into it, what you see is people being put in a very uncomfortable situation, from slavery, fighting to survive, many people dying and such like that, and being squished and mushed together in small communities and groups that are being forced together. So if you have, for example, a lot of slaves and such like that, they may all come from completely different cultural backgrounds, but they're being forced together basically because they are considered second class or even third class citizens, the color of their skin, but they don't necessarily, the white man don't think, well, those two people are different tribes from completely different parts of the world. Oh, they kind of look the same to me, they're the same. Which what you have is essentially you have all of these various people being forced together, and it's either sink or swim. They either evolve together, grow together, share knowledge in order to get by, or potentially just don't. And a lot of people think that hoodoo and hoodoo practice and such is purely from traditional African religions and such. So basically people being taken, brought over to the Americas and trying to maintain a certain amount of culture or to do their best. What you really need to look at is the influences that are around. Think of it more like everyone, if you imagine you were on a flight to China or somewhere like that, and that flight crash lands like that TV show Lost, with a bunch of people from lots of different backgrounds on that flight. You crash land on an island and you have to make a culture. You're literally mashed together. You might have a doctor, you might have this, you might have that, you might have people from various different parts of the world that speak different language and such, but you've got to get by as a group to survive. Hoodoo is really interesting one to look at from that perspective, because you have things like, well, yeah, okay, there are slaves and such like that, but then there's also influences from Native Americans, there's influences from Irish, because you have all of these other people that are also considered second or third class citizens, not even citizens potentially, that still get pushed in this category. So you've got like the elitist and such. One of the things Harry Hyatt makes reference to, which is really interesting, is regarding people going to the sort of people that actually pay for the services, essentially, because it's quite service orientated. So when asked type of client, so I'm going to use the terms that he uses, black versus white clients, page 26. Interviewee notes that most clients of Madam Collins, who was some sort of root worker or something, is mainly white middle class people, essentially. So what's really interesting is that although there is people coming together to share practices and having to evolve and work together, actually, as things progress, a lot of these somewhat famous people may service their own communities with their magical powers and knowledge and such, but word gets out. And then all of a sudden you see these almost like these little businesses, much like over in the UK and Europe, and that you have like the cunning folk or the cunning man, wise woman type thing. You actually have people seek them out and they charge money for services. What's really interesting is that what is it that the service entails? So from this sort of research, you never really find it out. The same with cunning folk practices. There aren't any cunning folk that really sit down and tell you the science of the magic behind all of it. You just get the, well, I just made a witch bag or a gree bag, or I made this, or, oh, you've got to go and drink this potion of midnight. You don't really know what's in it. And it's been really interesting researching this, both with traditional witchcraft, cunning folk arts, and hoodoo, in that the lot of information that's out there is stuff that's passed down from people, and the actual sources, there are sources out there that you can find, like this Harry Hyman books from early 1900s, I think it is. Because obviously it was over the course of his career, he met lots of different people. It's not like he managed to do it all in a year or something. But these things that the client is fucking clueless at the end of the day. The practitioner might understand, or they might just be a charlatan that's looking to make a quick bob, but no one really knows how the magic works. Sometimes that it gives good results, sometimes it doesn't give good results, and we have a bit of a mystery of that within witchcraft. I think this whole, eye of newt, wing of bat thing and cauldrons and all that sort of thing is very much the same. So with regards to stereotypes and hoodoo and such like that, we see that sort of thing on television. You watched the American Horror Story, didn't you? With Maria LaBelle and all that in the witches and the Coven one and the Apocalypse one. What did you think of that? Did you think, oh, I watched that, oh yeah, that's what hoodoo's like? Did you think, oh, that's an artist's depiction of it? What did you think? Did you think, oh, that's terrible cultural misappropriation?
Well, I very rarely think that, but mainly because stereotypes are stereotypes. So regardless of how accurate they are, they're designed to be a caricature of something. A stereotype isn't about authenticity. I think that's kind of where a lot of people get their hang-ups and their wokeness from, is not really investing in actually this is a caricature, it's supposed to be. There isn't very few people up in arms about how witches are depicted, because they apparently don't exist. So you've got a kind of safe bet there. But yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it, but who doesn't love a sassy black woman? Like, well, I don't care of the context. I will watch that shit regardless. Like,
many people will say that is a stereotype that does not help, and that it's had its day, and that we should be getting rid of all of this. But I don't know. I think it depends on whether it's true or not, doesn't it? If that is an actor or someone that actually acts like that in real life, or is portraying a character that is like that in real life, I don't know. But then that's a whole nother discussion, isn't it?
Yeah. At the end of the day, what doesn't interest me is watching shows like Shameless, or watching soaps like bloody EastEnders.
East End trash.
I won't watch any of those things. But you put something on with a sassy black woman in it, I'm pretty much game for a while. Yeah. Well, anything with like, you can binge for a day, but then you want something else to binge, and then you'll go back to the original thing you binged and watch it again. But maybe then I'm probably
Do you just
not.
go back to Golden Girls at that point?
Golden Girls. I haven't watched Golden Girls in years. My go-to at the moment is, which is another stereotype and fantasy, but I'm very much rewatching parts of Gilmore Girls at the moment, and that's about.
Never watched that, so I'm not sure what that's actually about.
Well, it's about a girl and her mom who are close.
Has it got any
Who
Hoodoo in it?
reject? No, not at all.
Oh, it's not
But-
really on topic then.
Not really. But ultimately, stereotypes are always going to be hurtful to those that exist within the caricature. But unfortunately, such is culture. Anyway,
Are they more? Are they worse for the people that are like the caricature? Or are they worse for the people that are not like the caricature, though? Because I've always thought that it's worse for the people that aren't, and having talked to some people that say I'm wrong, I am starting to think, well, actually, yeah, it probably does harm the people that it is a caricature of. Does that make sense, or does that not make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I suppose if we were to make it relevant, so the
The sassy SBF is what they call it, isn't it?
SBF.
The sassy black friend is what they call it. I've heard it referred to as. So if you go for that,
yeah, or you actually go to one that's relevant to us. Obviously, whether or not you will have experienced this, but obviously, I've spent a large period of my life desperately not wanting to be the gay best friend, the GBF, because actually that is a kind of, again, a dangerous stereotype for those that don't fit that category. It's not a pleasant one for the ones that do fit the category, but I think it impacts the community as a whole in a more harmful way than I think it hits the individual.
Okay, so let's take that one, right? So if you have a sassy black friend, so a very sassy person, right? And they are sassy, and there's a stereotype of that, but that person is sassy. Is that more offensive to them, or is it more offensive to the person that isn't sassy? So, for example, to give another example, if you've got a very camp, limp-wristed pansy, yes, and they are like that, right? And then you have someone that would be classed as quote unquote, they say straight acting, don't they? And you've got on television a very flamboyant kind of Julian Clary type, but in like a show like Little Britain, so not a real person, it's just a caricature. Who is that more harmful to? Is it harmful to the limp-wristed pansy type, or is it more harmful to the straight acting person type, or is it is it just overly harmful for everyone, or do we just need to get a grip and not care?
I think it's more harmful to the community as a whole. So I think what the actual issue is not so much which stereotypes do we show. What's important is that we show as wide a variety as possible.
Okay.
So it should show the whole spectrum of gay men, the same way it should show the whole spectrum of black women. Like it's not enough to just show. It becomes dangerous in the sense that they will fixate on one kind of stereotype, and then that becomes toxic, because it then becomes something when those that aren't part of that world, and even to the ones that are, if that's all you know, so to keep it to a field that's relevant for us, if because I can't speak for black women, although many gay men try, like,
can you speak for all gay men though?
I can't speak for all gay men, but I'm not attempting to.
Can you speak for yourself?
I can speak from my experience, and that's all I can speak from.
We can all speak for ourselves, apart from those that cannot speak.
So, well, even those that can't speak will find a way to convey the message. But my point is more the fact that actually showing there is a overwhelming, partly of the kind of wokeness movement, which again is stolen from those from the 70s and the 60s, but this kind of new version of the wokeness that's kind of occurring at the moment is more about the fact that actually, if you represent everybody, or at least attempt to represent everybody, then you essentially get rid of stereotype. Is the kind of attempt that's being made. But the problem we have is more the fact that we don't speak to one another. So even if you existed in a small community, we get all our information from television these days and the internet. So that's why it's dangerous. But the actual dangerous part of it is the fact that people don't mix and therefore don't have their own experience of these other cultures, of these other groups of people, rather than the fact the stereotype we use. So this, it's like, for me, I always compare it to kind of like the old TV shows we grew up on, like Hello Hello and Dad's Army.
Not something from during the war. I didn't grow up on Hello and Hello. We had Grange Hill.
No, but you grow up from what are those reruns of things like that?
Dad's Army.
Kind of show. Those sorts of things are in our kind of cultural knowledge because they were reruns when we were growing up. So part of that is that you kind of see those stereotypes there. But because they are stereotypes and that people aren't actually like that, the kind of slapstick culture of British television kind of gives us the kind of context to go, French people don't sound like that, or German people don't sound like that, or that's not really what it was like in the war. Those sorts of things are, that there is, even though it's not your current context, that it's not really reflective. The context at which it's in. Whereas I think nowadays we get so much about the ultra realism. So, where you can't tell that the monster is a monster, or things like what was a cartoon like Transformers is suddenly a real thing. Like, you can physically see it. And then it's then added on to by the fact that we are stupid enough to spend a fortune to prove it's possible. So they go and make one that is physically capable of, readjusting itself, that sort of thing. So because we're in that kind of world of ultra real, I think, and don't spend enough time communicating to one another, those two things then corroborate to, well, those are real. The GBF is real. The sassy black woman, all black women are like that. Like, well, the only way you would believe that is if you've never met a group of black women. You're basing your entire cultural knowledge on what you've seen on a television or on the internet. And because of how the algorithms on things like TikTok work, that then means that you're constantly awash with, well, I found that sassy black woman funny, or that ultra queer sassy bloke really funny. So therefore the algorithm then shows you more and more of that, to the point that you're like, oh, all gay men are like that. That's just how they are.
He does, flipping his hand. Right. Taking it back to Hoodoo, yeah. If someone came to you and said, Chris, I'd like to learn this Hoodoo. I'd like to learn the real Hoodoo. Okay. How would you go about teaching them, or where would you refer them to, or what would you do if someone said that?
So for me, it would normally be a case of, well, I can show you my outsider's understanding of. So at which point you can point them in the direction of certain parts, certain literature, or you can try and point them in the direction of people. There are more and more people like practitioners online and all that kind of stuff. So you can kind of point people going, that's the sort of thing you are looking at. Ultimately, I couldn't teach Hoodoo. I could teach Hoodoo inspired,
You
but I
could
could
teach magic.
I could teach magic with a hoodoo flair.
Mhm.
Like, but actually, my first question would be, why do you need to learn that? The main reason for me is that's not a hoodoo shit kind of comment. That's more a case of what's drawing you to hoodoo
Yeah.
as opposed to some other practice.
Mm.
Especially if you've got, a Caucasian girl in front of you with no connection whatsoever. Why are you wanting to learn hoodoo with something that is so ethnically charged? What have you seen? What's your actual basis for that? Because if it's because you've just watched, American Horror Story a couple of too many times, or something like that, and you kind of like, I like the aesthetic, then my comment are going to get very rude very quickly, as to say, kind of, okay, so what are your actual thoughts about magic in general? What do you actually know? And then it becomes very much a grilling of, okay, do you know anything? Or is your understanding of magic purely from television?
Well, yeah, I mean, most people, when they come to a magical path these days, their exposure is to stereotypes. That's one of the reasons I think we picked on and really talked about that today. But back in the day, you took in hundreds of years ago, your exposure would have been to what you're exposed to. If you grew up in New Orleans before the internet and before all of this, and you weren't very well traveled, and you heard all of the local stories, and you heard of the clients talking about this and that and the other, and you wanted to learn magic, you're going to go there because there's stuff like that that's going on, isn't there? Nowadays, we're quite divorced from local culture. I think local practice, what's going on, magical practice or any other type very often. And we see snippets of other things and we think it looks cool, or we think we have a connection to it and stuff like that. And you probably have a draw to it for a reason, but abandoning everything and going for that is generally because you feel drawn to a practice. You can't explain why, and you're going to go and start learning or start seeking out in the direction that you're drawn to or drawn from. Now, I'm going to read out some very interesting things from a very official prestigious institution, or someone that actually is part of a very famous institution to do with hoodoo and such. So they do a course. Okay, so this course, there are some prerequisites, Chris. I'm wondering if you, Fausty Witch, meet the prerequisites. I'm going to quote. So, I only take students who show a past history with my shop. The purchase of a few candles or a book is not enough for me to take a person on as a student. Basically means you have to have bought a certain amount. Do you get a coupon book type thing, or one of those stamps you collect? Oh, you've spent $1,000, therefore you're now eligible for me to teach you how to use that shit you just bought from me. What are your thoughts on that first prerequisite?
Well, I don't think I'd meet the threshold because I've definitely
you don't shop
I've definitely not spent enough at her shop.
Does it sound worrying? Does it sound okay?
It would worry me on the basis that you are basing an interest, engaging a level of interest based on dollars spent, would be my question there. Because like we've said before, you might have somebody that's wanting to learn, and the reason they're wanting to learn is because they're in poverty and they want to get out of it. That means that you would automatically say all poor people would never be able to learn magic.
So, another quote from the same course. If you are white, Caucasian, American, and fall into that 40%, not entirely sure what that means, but I think it's 40% heritage, I will not accept you for enrollment in this course. I've put, despite the fact that this course is actually being run by a white woman, called Catherine Ironwood. What about that? That seems strange to me. It also seems racist to me that you have a white woman, that is saying that, what was the quote? I only take students on with pass. If you are white, American, and fall into the 40%, I will not accept your enrollment on this course. She only wants to teach black people, but she's white. Is that racism?
It's a kind of racism, yes.
It's a kind of racism. Does that send alarm bells, given that's the second part of the criteria?
Very much so.
Okay, we have more criteria. Okay, this
mainly
one
because I'd want to know what her credentials were to say that she
Well,
should have to do something like that.
From my understanding, her credentials were that she's read that Harry Hyatt book and she's made and cobbled together a magical system from that, and then taken lots of recipes and such from other people that she's collected and found along the way. That's my personal understanding of it, whether that's true
In
or
that
not.
case, my assumption there would be that she needs to restock her books, and actually what she's looking for is to learn more from you than you were going to learn from her. That's my assumption.
Yeah.
Based on that, if she is not in, so you're going to automatically assume she's not part of an accepted lineage. But again, we're being a different kind of racist there on the basis that we're assuming because she's a white woman, she won't have been included. I don't know the inner sanctums enough to know.
I don't know. All I
hereditary blood
is that she is highly influenced by this course book, which is the reason why I thought I'd get it. So the last point, which is another quote, I wonder what you think about this, because I think this is the worst one out of all of them. No, I do not give away my recipes in the course I teach either. So it's the Hoodoo course.
It's a Hoodoo course where you're basically taught how to mix her pre-prepared ingredients that you will have to purchase.
Yes. Yeah.
So basically she's got a study group that are going to be made up of her best clients.
Exactly. And they have to pay for the privilege, right? So this is another thing that I find quite strange, is that other books that practitioner and other practitioners have published, I've immediately thought this is a catalogue, because what it is, it's like I said earlier, magic spell for money, money drawing oil, 1 ingredient, money drawing candle, 2 ingredients, special herb, 3 ingredient. All of those are sold by the shop, and that's an ingredients list. That's like when Tesco's or Lidl and that come up with a recipe for lasagna, and they just put down, right, all of the stuff that they sell in their shop for lasagna, but then don't give you the method of how it's made or how to make it. They're just like, put it all together or sprinkle it on your candle. To me, that isn't teaching. To me, that is selling pre-prepared products. That's selling a ready meal, is essentially what that's doing. And if I was to create a course on witchcraft, I certainly was sure as shit not, and we bear in mind teach witchcraft and such, if I was to teach hoodoo practice and such like that, which I don't really, but if I was, I would find it very strange that someone would take the approach of taking pre-prepared stuff that they sell in their own shop and getting you to buy it. You buy the course, you buy the book, then you buy all the products, and then you just mix them together. That doesn't seem right to me. If they sell a money drawing candle, or they sell a money drawing incense or a money drawing oil, I think that the most simplest way to do that is to fucking teach them how to make the money drawing oil, and then how to use the money drawing oil, and most importantly, how all of it fucking works, which is something that I find very, very worrying in modern witchcraft courses and books. And I'm seeing that mirrored also in hoodoo practice, hoodoo courses, hoodoo books and such. It's very correspondence and little to no science of magic occult science or really anything other than buy this product from me.
But also, you've also got to remember that the way that we do business is bad for business. So teaching someone how to create these things themselves so that they eventually don't need you is not a business model. Which is also the reason why both of us still work and plan to continue working. This is something we do as a bonus on top.
Well, we teach, but there's a difference because we teach. So I have done the Cunning Man thing, and I have gone and been paid reasonably substantial amounts of money to do the work for the person, but the person's paying me to do the work. What we're talking about here, though, is this person is doing a course. They're teaching. And you can't teach. I mean, you are a professional teacher. Chris, can you teach without teaching? And in what ways could you teach without teaching? Because this seems like teaching without teaching. You're selling a course and saying, I'm going to teach someone something, but you're not actually teaching them anything. And I don't see this as accidental teaching. You know, like Mr. Meyer,
to be
wax
fair,
on, wax off. Oh, look, you know how to block a punch now.
It's how most universities are built. They come with a list of books of which you need to complete the course. Those books are often written by the people that are actually teaching you. So really, they're already taking the money for your tuition. They're then on top of that selling you additional things that you must buy in order to complete and get the certificate at the end. It's no different, really. It's just kind of how our education system's now built.
Is it, though? I think it surely depends. If you went and you did a degree in theoretical physics or something like that, yeah, there's going to be books, but you're going to have to learn some high-level maths, and you'll be taught that, and you will understand it. If you go to college and learn to go on a cookery course, you'll be taught how to cook, won't you?
Yeah.
You know,
but you'll be taught how to use the industry standard machinery. That the only way you're ever going to work with again is if you actually work within that industry. So if you go and spend that time, you've learned how to build a hadron collider.
Yeah.
You're not going to have one at home.
No.
You are reliant on that industry for you to work, which means there is a limited amount of observatories or whatever that you could work at. There aren't enough of those for you to all do it. So then comes the competition aspect. The same as if you were a chef. You could go and learn to be a chef, but there's still going to be a limit to how many restaurants there are in the world that operate at that level and can afford. You're then going to have to leave that place with that standard and start from scratch again.
So what's quite interesting is because you see this sometimes in the witchcraft and such, is the idea of charging for services and such. So some people will charge for services, some people won't charge for services, this kind of thing, that kind of thing. There seems to be some people do, some people don't in the hoodoo, community and such. There's one specific one, page 70, I think it is. It's a story of someone called Miss Healer, who is treating a person. The person referred to her as Miss Witch, someone who has a reputation for casting bad magic on people, and they say that she hoodooed them. So Miss Healer, as her nickname, what her nickname is, she's got a good reputation for not charging. So what she does is she doesn't request payment, but she instead takes what she's given. So, she doesn't say this much for fixing your problem, but people often give her stuff. I think we've both worked like that before, where we've not necessarily said about a payment, maybe more so back in the day, not so much for me nowadays. Back in the day, I wouldn't necessarily take payment. Sometimes I would just be given stuff because people are very grateful. And the smart people know that they don't want to be owing a witch a favor, do they? But this is an interesting comparing and comparison, because you see in a hoodoo, publicly with the shops and all that kind of thing, it's very, very much embracing of payment for things, whether it be payment in kind, whether it would be payment in the form of money, whether it would be payment in some other form, it doesn't matter. But there's always, I'm not just doing this out of the kindness of my heart. which there are for certain practitioners, of course. But certainly within a lot more with religious forms of magical practice, so like the Wiccan style things, it's very much they do things because they feel it's their job to do that as a part of that faith or whatever. As professional witches, we're very kind of completely the opposite to that. There's always a price to be paid, and we set the price or we negotiate.
But what blows my mind with that really is that comes out of a very Abrahamic method. The difference is if you were a priest or a nun, you would have your lodgings and board covered for you. So you'd be in the convent, or you'd have your own church, and the vicarage is provided. So in those situations, the congregation has provided for you through that kind of setup. For some reason, when it crosses over to modern day practice, even with the spiritualists, where they feel they can't accept payment, you're kind of like, well, I don't understand. And this concept of calling it a gift, so that therefore you can't possibly charge for it. And it's just all bollocks, because ultimately it has always come at a cost. And the reason it's always come at a cost is because you can't live on air and dreams. Although the Buddhists do make a very good attempt at it. Generally speaking, you can't live off that. And definitely not in a modern world that we live in now, which is entirely capitalist. It just makes absolutely no sense why any psychic or witch would do all their work for free. We draw the line. If I'm teaching you how to do it, you'll be doing the work. If you want me to do the work for you, you will pay handsomely for it. It means that I do a hell of a lot, do a hell of a lot less work.
We charge obscene amounts of money because we want people to practice and we want people to grow in magic. So the reason why we charge that is as a punishment. It as you should be doing this for yourself. If you're making me do it, sure shit, you're going to be uncomfortable as fuck. There is an interesting one that's come up actually, because it's something that we talk about a lot, which is the difference between an amateur and a professional. So there's many people practice but are not really considered a doctor or proper magical practitioner, hoodoo practitioner and such. They don't seem to make their own spells and such. Instead, back then they'd buy hoodoo from mail order or from a drugstore. That don't make them a doctor, I've put in quotes, which I borrowed from that, which is really interesting. Because there is highlighting obviously a difference back then between practitioners and people that would make their own stuff versus people that would buy stuff. And I think that you could actually, from local like pharmacies and that, you could probably buy some hoodoo products, which is quite interesting when I researched that. Obviously, it's really difficult. True professionals know how the spells work and don't just copy a recipe. Now, nowadays, there's a lot of magical practitioners that teach courses that just teach recipes. And I've seen this in witchcraft, I've seen this in voodoo, even Chris's cat agrees with that and dislikes it.
So, yeah, it's tricky because to me, there are some setups that we accept that person doesn't know how. So the one I come across the most is obviously where, when I used to work with clinical pharmacists, the general populace don't appreciate their level of training. So because they're used to, the only pharmacist they ever see is the one that dispenses their drugs. The old days, and not, even not that long ago, really, a lot of basic medicines were mixed up at the pharmacy. So for those that are kind of in their 50s or plus, will remember the days when they could go and get a cough mixture that was made up at the pharmacy. Whereas nowadays, because of suing culture of the US mostly, is now at the point where they just won't take the risk of making you something. It would be a lot cheaper for everybody involved if they were able to. But at the same time, it doesn't exist for that reason. So there is that kind of part of you would expect that the person knows what they are giving you. So whether or not they made it themselves or not isn't necessarily the kind of, benchmark for it. Is my benchmark would be, could they? Do they actually have the knowledge to know how that was produced for you? I don't expect them to have necessarily made all the tinctures, because some are just too costly to achieve. It's cheaper for you to buy that in. That's just good business. But I would expect that you would be willing to take that tincture and trust that it would work in order to justify you selling it to me. So,
and to know what it is.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of where that base is. I think that's where I struggle kind of with teachers particularly. Some people are of the feeling, well, I have a teaching degree, I can teach anything. And you're kind of like, well, that's not quite true though, is it? Do you have enough of a knowledge base in order to? Because some people think teaching is just being a couple of steps ahead of the person you're teaching. Whereas actually, I would say someone who is proficient enough to teach you should be able to fix any problem I throw at them. So kind of, I don't know, it's tricky. And believe it or not, we are already out of time and we've got questions, Liam.
So the first question I think we've got is voodoo synonymous? I think we already answered that. So voodoo is definitely a religion. Hoodoo is more of a mixed mash of practices that evolve and grows over time. Being in the American Midwest, there's not much cultural magical flavor, which is an opportunity and an obstacle. Well, I would say that we meet some very magical people that are from that area, and they keep themselves and their practices very quiet. So there probably is, but it's not in your face, which again, like you say, swings and roundabouts, opportunity and an obstacle. Martin says, I do find it difficult to find magical folklore where I live. The Midlands seems bland in its magical culture. Personally, I would consider that to be a bonus, because if there is no folklore and such, you should start creating some. Think of that troll under that bridge. You could make a troll to go under the bridge. You could make something haunted, conjure up some stuff and bind it to a place, and then listen to all of the fairy tales and such. I would quite like to live in a place that's bland and full of, well, nothing much, because then I get to tinker and I get to put all of the monsters and things and that in, which is quite fun. I think we'll leave you with one thing before we go, which I believe is the first spell written in the book, page 72 to 73 on the first volume. It's basically a client seeks out a practitioner by the name Zippy Tull, because she feels that she's being worked on, so magic being worked against, so it doesn't feel very well and needs some relief from the sicky symptoms. So old Zippy does some sort of magical diagnosis for the problem and tells her that there's a lock of her hair buried in her family graveyard next to her dead brother. She needs to dig it up between the hours of 12 o'clock at night and 1 o'clock in the morning, so the evil person's spirit can't see. Interesting bit of folklore there. And bring it to Zippy. So the person does, they go and find an actual piece of hair, which is very interesting, because you don't see a lot of that now, do you? You don't see a lot of that, oh, wait a minute, you've been spelled. Yeah, I can tell there's a witch that's done a spell on you. I know where the voodoo doll or hoodoo doll or a fucking puppet or this bit of magic's buried. That candle they've burnt, they throw it in the trash can or in the waste bin outside Tesco supermarket or Walmart. Go there, get it. Make sure you do it in an unreasonable hour, just because it sounds more magical, and then bring it to me and we'll destroy it together. Don't go send so much of that. Normally it's all this curse reverse candles they sell and such, isn't there? Zippy gets it, so the client actually goes and does it, clearly digs up some piece of hair. Whether Zippy put it there or not, who knows? I mean, Zippy did tell her exactly where to look. Who knows? But basically, Zippy gets the cord, which is tying the lock of hair together. That is apparently what's causing the magic. So she snips it and basically breaks the spell by destroying its physical anchor. Now, this uses obviously biological sympathetic magic as well. So the idea of that person's obviously got the client's hair, done some magic kind of cord binding magic, gone and put it somewhere to rot away, and by breaking that physical anchor breaks the spell, which is very simple magic. It's also something that me and Chris tend to teach beginners, and then very, very quickly you need to get rid of doing things that way, because let's be fair, if you do a spell on someone and then they're gonna be able to break it by just destroying the physical vessel, that's sloppy magic. I mean, even a mundane can do that. They can't even do no magical seeing or nothing. It's like those horror films. You can learn a lot from horror films. When they do all the Ouija board shit and it's haunted and they burn the Ouija board, fuck all happens, doesn't it? It doesn't do nothing. That's the sort of magic you kids need to start doing. Have you got anything left, any advice to give with regards to hoodoo or anything like that, Chris, before we go?
No, not really. It's one of those things. It's interesting to observe other people's practices, and I heavily encourage that. You know, take as many other cultures into consideration as possible. Just be aware of what that is, and that there is a borderline between what should be doing and what is potentially disrespectful. So just kind of figuring out where that line is, and actually just studying what's happening is often far more interesting than how it's being presented. And I think that's missed on far too many practitioners.
There's a very understated way of learning about other people's cultural magic and such, because it's very difficult to learn hoodoo or traditional witchcraft or something like that if you're from the outside, because you're not likely to be let in. You won't be let in, and when you are, you're often taught the watered down kind of shit. One of the things that I find is extremely worthwhile in terms of learning is to work against a magical practitioner. Most of the things that I know about gypsy magic, and I say that because I'm from the UK and that is the official term in the UK that you're supposed to use, so I don't want you Americans going on about it. That's a bad term because it's not here, right? Gypsy magic or hoodoo and such is because I've worked against it, I've broken it, and I've tinkered with it and practitioners. So you have to have a level of understanding of magic to be able to see and understand how the spell's working, how it works, in order for you to fuck with it, tinker with it, or break it. And when you understand how it works, you start to see the methodology, and the methodology that you could replicate, completely replicate it or tinker with it and do it differently. When you understand actual magic, it's like understanding mathematics, and a lot of things can be boiled down to mathematics. You don't need, if you're going to watch some tribe perform some sort of sacred ritual, you don't need them to explain the magical side of things, because if you've developed an understanding and sensitivity to magic, you can see the magic. You can go to that thing and you can see, I know this basically entirely dependent on sympathetic magic and ancestor, because that's the energy that's there. I can feel the chill of the dead being brought in. I don't need to understand what language they're speaking. I can see the fucking dead people and they're doing all the work. They're getting the dead to do it all. It's like, this is necromantic practice. How do you know that? You weren't told that. That's supposed to be a secret. Well, it ain't a fucking secret because I can see it with my psychic eyes. Same with this sort of thing. Oh, but that's my favorite, most powerful curse. I put this in it, this in it, this in it. I'm like, yeah, is energy that's been fired in this direction, and I've observed where it's come from because I can see it, and I've observed the effects that it's had, and I've observed the damage that it's done to that person's physical and energetic bodies, and I'm just going to undo that damage. I don't need to know what fucking that you put High John the Conqueror root in it. I really couldn't give a shit what was in it. I understand the methodology and the how it's worked. Bit like when doctors and that prescribe certain things when someone's got a virus. If it's important enough and it's big, they might start to think we really need to understand what fucking virus this is, because it's one we don't see very often. But if it's just a virus, I mean, they don't even bother half the time, do they? They don't
No,
care.
standard antibiotics.
It's too much effort. They just prescribe standard antibiotic, which is why we have
Broad
antibiotic
spectrum.
resistance, probably because they do that too much. But there we go. Goodbye, everyone.